Welcome to Labor Lounge Podcast. I'm Anthony Abrantes, Assistant Executive Secretary Treasurer of the Eastern Atlantic States Regional Council of Carpenters, the Carpenters Union.
And I'm Cyndie Williams, Executive Director of the CCT. Together as your co-hosts, we'll explore the world of organized labor, bringing you behind-the-scenes stories and insights from inspiring union leaders, dedicated partners, and community change makers. In each episode, we dive into authentic conversation to uncover what unions are really about beyond the headlines and the myths.
Whether you're new to the movement or a union ally, our conversation showcasing diverse voices and real-life stories will explore union hurdles, triumphs, labor's rich history, its role in workforce development, all while shedding light on how unions create lasting change and foster economic growth and creating generational wealth.
Join us as we build a broader coalition, elevate future generations, and showcase how unions contribute to creating a positive cultural legacy.
Tune in, get informed, and find out how organized labor is making a difference. So today we're joined by Jessica Ramirez of Darcy Johnson Day. Jessica is a trial attorney and partner at the law office of Darcy Johnson Day, specializing in personal injury, sexual abuse, and product liability cases. She also serves as the assemblywoman for New Jersey's 37th District. Passionate advocate for workers' rights and victims of violence, Jessica has worked with underserved communities, including immigrant and sexual assault survivors. She's appeared on major media outlets like Fox News, Univision, and hosts the Emmy-winning Imagenes TV Show. Jessica is dedicated to justice and giving back to her community. Jessica, thank you for being here. We appreciate you taking the time this morning.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here for sure.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So we'll jump right into questions and we'll get to know each other a little bit. I've had the opportunity to meet you before, but I'm really excited to dive deeper and get to know you a little bit better today. So welcome. If you were talking to someone who knew nothing about worker exploitation in the construction industry and you could only tell them one thing, what would that be?
I think it would be that it happens so much and people don't think that it happens this much, but it does. And when you look at the workers, I mean, most of them are undocumented. Most of them don't speak English. Most of them are from low income pockets of our state. So they are targeted. I mean, just think about the construction industry. If you try to unionize, they get upset. They don't want you to have workers' rights. They don't want you to be informed. So I think that people don't see, in my industry and when I start talking to people, I just don't think that they know how much it happens. I think is one of the biggest things that people would be very surprised to know about, how pervasive it is.
Yeah, and I think you're dead on. I think, like, for us, like, we live and breathe this every day, just like you. And the predominant workforce that we're dealing with is not our own, because they're taken care of, they're protected. It's an immigrant workforce, predominantly Hispanic, doesn't know their own rights. And when you talk to outsiders about it, they're like, there's no way that happens
I know,
in
it
this
happens
society.
all the time.
It happens in so many different industries related to an immigrant workforce. So, with that said, what do you think, because you get to deal with workers all the time, what do you think the misconception is on the worker side on what their rights are? Because I think many of them don't understand what protections they have in this country.
Sure. So a lot of my clients that I deal with they of course are here in this country. They don't speak the language, so having to navigate a system where they can't communicate. But a lot of them are also even at home, they don't know how to read or write, even in their own language, right? People come here because at home is really bad. Nobody leaves when my parents didn't leave Puerto Rico because we had it great there. We left because we had no money, because there was no opportunities. So a lot of times I'm dealing with clients that don't even know how to read in their own language, or have a 5th grade education. And to us, living as Americans, we forget that still today in Ecuador, in Honduras, people are living in dirt floors. So then we start with someone that's totally scared. They don't know their rights even in their own language. And they come here, and it's twofold. What I see a lot, it's a cultural thing, right? So I'm out there in the community. I'm doing a radio show on the Spanish radio station, telling them that they have rights, that they can, even if you're undocumented, you can open up a workers' comp claim. But first, they don't know that. And second, they're so thankful that they have a job that they will not do that to their employer, because they're like, but he gave me a job. And they also think that, well, I don't want to sue my employer. No, that's not how it works in New Jersey. You can't sue your employer. It's a workers' compensation claim, and you open it up and you're suing an insurance company. So it's cultural and just not knowing anything.
And even just understanding the systems of how America works is a major education for them.
Absolutely. So what we try to do, and that's why I respect unions so much, is that education, being out there, education, being out on the radio, doing Know Your Rights. And we'll talk about it all week, and we'll still get a client that will call in and is really scared. And then I'll sit down with them for a half hour, for 45 minutes. That's not the law. I promise you. They can't fire you. Then we'll sue them for discrimination. And they'll say, well, you know what? I'm still going to think about it. I'm still scared. Which is so sad. I'm like, you don't believe me? You don't believe your lawyer? But they just don't want to do it. They're too scared. And also because they're so thankful that someone gave them a job.
Sure, and they're so dependent on those wages to live every day, too, that's a risk.
Yeah, and I think they're vulnerable, and they're relying on sometimes the same people that are exploiting them to give them guidance. And if you can't read in your own language, and you can't read here, and you don't understand what your rights are, you're very susceptible to being misguided and continue to be taken advantage of. And that's why it's obviously important to have representation. It's important to have people that protect your workers' rights, and just have guidance in a system that we have today.
I think what we get a lot, this happens all the time. So, and then we talk about it on the radio, we talk about it, we try to give the information. So a worker will get hurt, and the employer will take them to the hospital and say, first lie, say that you fell off a bike, or something else happened that wasn't work related. Usually that happens. Or if that doesn't happen, don't worry, I will pay for your medicine today. I will pay for your hospital visit. Or they'll say, it doesn't matter, just apply for charity care. They will guide them that way. And then we have this worker who's like, wow, my employer took me in his car and took me to the hospital and told me he's going to pay for this. But I'm getting all these bills. They're not paying it. No, they're never going to pay it. And now if you need further treatment because you're really hurt, or God forbid, the injury's so bad that you're going to be disabled, or you're going to require years of treatment, they're never going to pay that. And I'll explain that to them, and sometimes they're too scared. A lot of times, not sometimes, a lot of times. So they'll live with a disability, they'll live with pain.
You mentioned that, sometimes the employer where they got hurt will guide them on what to say because of how they got hurt versus on the job where it's a workers' comp issue. I know most recently in Jersey City, we had somebody get hurt on a job site, and because they did not want people to know somebody got hurt on a job, they actually put them in a garbage can, rolled them out of the building so that no one would see the injured worker. And then when they finally got them out of the building to a place where no one would see them, then they got them into the car and drove them to the hospital. But that's how vulnerable these folks are.
That's true.
For us, it's hard to believe, but for many of these workers, to your point earlier, is they came from somewhere for an opportunity here. And when they look at what they have here, even though we know it's wrong, it's not always necessarily wrong to them because it's still better than where they came from. It's still the American dream.
And because of the hate they receive, the prejudice, this person's actually given them a chance. They're going to be loyal, and they will lie, and they will not say anything. Even if you guide them, they just won't do it.
So that said, what are some of the steps that you think the state can take to improve worker protections on job sites, and how specifically unions can play a role in helping?
Well, that's a lot of things that they can do. One of them for sure should be, so there's all these rules. We do have laws, having better enforcement laws, having more funding for inspectors, hire more inspectors, have the union work with inspectors. I think a collaboration with unions and inspectors would be great because you really know what's going on. Paying inspectors more money, having also, and this doesn't happen a lot. You pretty much know when an inspector is coming in, we know that. So having them do unannounced visits, more unannounced visits. So there's a variety of things that I think the state can do. And of course, stiffer penalties, protecting the whistleblowers, coming up with task force where unions are represented, community members are represented, advocacy groups are represented, and really going into and doing the research, because that happens a lot. I'm new in the legislature. I'm 11 months in. I'm still a freshman. But what I've seen is a lot of times you need studies, but that's what they need. We need to see it in paper, because a lot of times people don't know what's really happening. So this is what happened. This is what we found. So again, do another study specifically for construction workers, for injured workers, I think would be a good idea as well.
Yeah, I think to your point of unexpected visits and audits are necessary. And it helps keep people on their toes, right? And that should be, in my opinion, both public and private sector, that they have the ability to just come in unannounced and check job sites.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, stiffer penalties are great, but sometimes those are like built into the job and getting caught. If you get caught, sometimes you negotiate pennies on a dollar. Most of the time you don't get caught. And one thing that we've seen that's been really effective and proactive is civil penalties are good, but criminal penalties are even better, right? Because the goal is to be proactive and change the culture and not continue business as usual. And if people start getting criminal charges put against them for misclassifying workers, taking advantage of workers dying on their job sites for negligence, that's how we change the culture. And I know that's probably not something the business community wants to hear, but the reality is the majority of businesses are good. And I think those businesses need to speak up for themselves, because they're being undercut by employers that are taking advantage of vulnerable workers. And I think that's a conversation that, we're having internally, right, amongst people that represent workers. But I think the business community needs to do a better job of protecting themselves as well. And this is one of the ways to do it.
No, I understand. And to your point, it is true. I mean, it's for them. There's a lot of these businesses and developers have so much money. A fine is nothing to them. That's just business as usual. So I understand the stiffer penalties, criminally related. I think, of course, we don't want to, I think it's ripe now. Corporate greed is a big deal now. So it is real. And I think now is the time to start talking about it, because people are listening.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is, sometimes the legal system fails, some of these folks. And we're always looking at good governing and good policy. And I know we've talked about this, not here on a podcast, plenty of times of, how unions, how stakeholders, community leaders, legislators like yourself can actually change that culture if we put proactive measures in place through good policies. And I believe personally, and we've talked about this over the years, is good policy does translate into real economic opportunities for people, not corporations. So I think we need to make sure we continue to focus on those policies that put worker protections in place, put people into the middle class, give them the opportunities to really achieve the American dream, but also make sure they get home safe to their families and create that hope that everyone else has had. We've been fortunate to have.
Anthony, maybe you could just take a few minutes just to talk about the role of a union organizer, the role of a union rep, just to talk about how they keep all protections for workers, rather than the misnomer that they're just protecting union workers.
Yeah, so I would say probably one of the misconceptions in the construction industry for us is, we have union organizers, union representatives. So yeah, their goal is to represent the union. But the reality is we have collective bargaining agreements in place. We've been doing this for 140 years. We have a pretty good system, right? Our workers, if they're part of the union, they're protected. They get the wages they're entitled to. They get their health care. They get their benefits. They get their pension. They work safely. But the reality is we're lucky if we're 1% of the construction industry in terms of our workforce. 99.9% of the construction workforce is non-union. And that's where the vulnerability comes in. And we end up spending the majority of our time protecting those workers with our attorneys for free, because we understand that when we protect workers, we also protect the interests of our good employers, our members. And we raise the opportunities for everybody. And I think at the end of the day, when our ancestors came here and when our organization first started, nothing has changed since then. At that point, it was, European immigrant workers that were being taken advantage of. They came together to make sure that they fought for just a 40-hour work week, an 8-hour work day, safe conditions. They weren't fighting for wages. They weren't fighting for benefits. They weren't fighting for pensions. They were fighting just to survive, to go home every day. That has not changed. 140 years later, The Hispanic community, if they've immigrated here, is dealing with the exact same things.
Yes.
And we're fighting for the exact same things. And that's been our mission from day one, and that's unfortunately going to continue to be our mission into the future.
I was just at a rally this last week, and again, going back to what people don't know, there was a gentleman that he got up and he says that he works 7 days a week. 7 days a week as a residential worker. And there was somebody next to me. What? Really? That happens? Yes, it happens. 7 days a week at $15 an hour.
We get calls every day for people that want to get into the union, whether they have worker status or don't. And when we ask them where they're working, predominantly it's residential. A lot of it's commercial now too. And when we ask them what type of working conditions is, they're making a decent wage relative to where they came from. But they're not making a decent wage relative to the hours they're working or the conditions they're working in. And it's sun up to sundown. It's Saturday and Sunday. It's till you get the job done. And when they're put in that position, the increase in safety, likely of getting hurt on a job site, increases. The likeliness that they're going to continue to get exploited increases. The likely that they're going to be the most vulnerable workforce in the industry increases. And they don't necessarily understand that, but it's up to us to educate folks, right? We do that for a reason, because we want to mobilize people. But workers can't do it alone. Unions can't do it alone. We need communities to kind of come together and understand what's really happening. And I think that's really the importance of why we're here too, right? Is to talk to other folks that have no idea what's happening, right? They show up every day. They show up at work at 9 o'clock. They're a 9 to 5er. They go to their office. They have a break. They have a lunch break. They work with their colleagues. They know their paycheck's going to be there at the end of the week. They have an HR department that they can go to. There is no HR department on the job site. Not even on union job sites is HR. The union is HR. So imagine what happens on non-union job sites where there is no union. You're at the mercy of the employer because you're loyal to the paycheck, and there's no HR department. Only bad things can happen.
Just the other day, I was driving home here locally with my 3 kids in the car, private project, commercial project, and I happened to drive by, and it was nighttime, and there was folks working out there under car headlight. Not even a spotlight, a construction spotlight. They literally had their car headlights on, and they're on the 2nd story working throughout the night. And normally, if it were just me in the car, I would have stopped. I would have taken pictures. I would have probably sent them into OSHA, right? But that could be something that anyone can do, right? Is complain when they see something unsafe, right? But I know that that's not the way it should be done. And most folks, if they were driving by, would say the same thing. But they just keep driving, not realizing that they could be helping by making a complaint. Just a regular citizen. But the truth of the matter is, they're probably under the gun. Somebody's pressuring them to be there, late at night, working hours, and it's really unfortunate. It's there for the naked eye to see, right? It's unfortunate. Okay, so as a partner at Darcy Day and someone who works in personal injury and product liability, you've seen how safety violations can impact workers. What do you think the legal communities can do to hold the companies more accountable for workplace accidents, and how can unions partner with legal professionals to strengthen these efforts?
Well, definitely keep litigating cases and being very aggressive with litigation. Going back to the legislature as well, having the workers' comp bar is a very, very strict bar. Thank God that we can sue third party. I had a huge construction case where my guy was in a ditch and it collapsed and he almost died, and we were able to, because he was a contracted worker, again, undocumented. There were so many issues with the case. We were able to sue third party, the excavation company, the managers, everybody, third party. But sometimes you can't. I just had a case where we lost because it was a sex assault case, wasn't a construction case, but the case was dismissed because there was a workers' comp bar, and we could only file a claim under workers' comp, and we couldn't do third party, and it's a sex assault. So I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to write legislation so sex assault could be one of the exceptions where you to the comp bar. So it's very difficult. The comp bar is very strict, but for sure, being aggressive with your litigation, getting experts, going to law firms that really just practice this, because we are able to have money to buy to contract experts, because you need so many experts in these cases and so many evaluations. And how we can partner with the unions is, you know, everything. You're really on the ground. You're the soldiers that can provide us information and talk to us about contracts, talk to us and be our experts as well, because we do definitely work with unions to get to know them and get to know really about the case and what is the industry standard. And it's very interesting how you get involved in a case and you learn a little bit of everything, like the angle of repos. Like, I never had heard that in my life until I started doing these construction cases. And then you become an expert for 9 months or 10 months you're doing the case, and then you forget, and then you get another case and you start getting more knowledgeable and you start meeting so many different people that can serve as experts.
So let's pivot to a different vulnerable workforce. You serve on the Military Veteran Affairs Committee in New Jersey. And as you know, a lot of our servicemen and women come back and they might have mental health issues, right? Or issues related to finding access to employment because of some of the challenges or experiences they've seen in the service. How can we help better support veterans transitioning into the workforce, particularly in New Jersey?
Well, the beautiful thing about veterans, you're going to get a very disciplined worker. But I think one of the ways is providing the workforce development, because they're getting out of the Army, the Navy, the Marines. They don't necessarily have the skills to start doing construction work. Mental health services, mentorship. That would be a great thing. I know that we're working on legislation, being in the Veterans Committee, to fast track certifications as well for different jobs or applications or industries that they're applying for, and or their spouses, because if they have to move for work and their spouse is certified in another state, fast tracking their certifications as well.
That's a really great point.
So that's a legislation that we're also working on as well. And affordable housing. I mean, affordable housing is such a big deal if they have to move around for work. I think all those things would be a great way to support veterans that unions can do. You're already doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about our organization and many of the building trades is we have our Helmets to Hard Hats program, which basically allows servicemen and women to transition right out of the military, direct entry into our apprentice program. And to your point, they tend to be some of the best employees because they have no problem getting up early. They love structure. They're part of an organization, an institution that supports one another, and the transition seems to be a lot easier from there to us. And what we find is mentorship is extremely important because they find their brothers and sisters who also served in the military in our organization, and I think it allows them to succeed much quicker than they might in some other industries, because that support system's there and it's a brotherhood. And our employers tend to love that workforce because they are disciplined, right? And they do work hard. And I think as an organization, we try to do our best to making sure that, when they do come back from their service, that those opportunities are there. I think where we fall short, and it's more about information or misinformation, is that I think we need to get them quicker while they're transitioning out of service. In many cases, what we see is they've already transitioned out, they're already in society. It could be 6 months, a year before they find out there's an opportunity for them. So I know we've been proactively thinking of better ways to get onto these bases and military institutions to make sure in that 6-month window, when they have that transition period, they already know what jobs are in place so that they can immediately transition to the building construction trades, particularly the carpenters union. So that's been extremely important to us.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and going back to the mentorship part, they're not complainers either. They don't ask for help. So a mentorship type of program would be so beneficial.
Yeah.
To veterans.
That's a good point, because even if you give them those types of mentorship, it's sometimes they're reluctant to join a group or even a group within to try to talk about anything related to military. It's almost that they keep it too close. But certainly it's a great program. Helmets to Hard Hats has been wonderful for our recruitment. And I know, my local in particular is focusing heavily on recruitment for military because they see the value and just won an award 2 years in a row, actually, for veteran services. So it's really important to us to make sure that we're helping them to thrive when they leave, and happy to do so.
and you also serve on the Women's Affairs Committee, which I would say similar to us. Like we have a Sisters and a Brotherhood program, which really focuses on women coming in the construction industry, which is not a traditional industry for women, but we're definitely seeing more and more participation in construction from women wanting to get involved and having a support system for women that come into construction, particularly a male-dominated industry. Men tend to be a little rough around the edges. It's a demanding industry. So making sure, and I know Cyndie was one of the chairwomen locally for our region, how important it is for women that don't necessarily go into an industry that's traditional to them and how we support them. And how we provide some of the wraparound services for childcare and some of the other things that are extremely important so that we eliminate barriers. And I know the Women Affairs Committee is doing a lot of that work. I don't know if you want to touch on some of the important things that you guys do in that committee.
Yeah, sure. Well, right now we're definitely looking at the disparity study that came out and how we can get women, give them more contracts, state contracts. And we had a lot of great women come in to testify, a lot of women in the construction industry saying, yeah, I haven't gotten any contracts. I just don't get them. That's something that we've been definitely working on. Of course, mental health, a lot of health related, childcare is a big one. I had a meeting with another union head, and he was showing me pictures of women working at night and on weekends with their children at construction sites running around.
No kidding.
Because the child care is such a huge issue.
Yep.
So I love to hear if unions can also help with child care. I don't know how you can help with child care, but that is a big deal because a lot of moms are single moms. What are they going to do?
Yep.
And they have to work.
The one thing I'm proud of, in particular for our organization, is I guess on two fronts. Is one that we've taken a step through our member assistance program to help women while they're on maternity leave to support them. And I know built into our collective bargaining agreements are the protections necessary for that women are in construction that have the ability to go on maternity leave without repercussion. And you mentioned the disparity study, and the one thing that makes me happy is that the number of women-owned businesses that we have that are union signatories employing both men and women is probably at a significantly higher rate than on the non-union side. And then at the end of the day, if we're going to talk about disparities and creating opportunities, where else in the world is there no gender disparity in terms of economic opportunity than unions, right? Whether you're male or female, you get the same wages, same benefits, same training, same opportunities. So I'm proud that we could say that. I can't necessarily say that for the folks that are undermining the industry, but I know it takes a lot of folks to bring that together. It took a lot of sacrifice. It takes good policy for what you guys are doing. So I want to make sure we continue to break down all those barriers and we eliminate all the disparity on the employment side and also on the worker side.
Sure. And similarly, I was able to be there and testify in front of the Women's Committee on behalf of the union and just talking about some of the values that we have and put in creation to make sure that we're protecting workers. And proud to give those positive stats, right? Because so many of them, like you said, were negative. And just trying to bring light to where we need as a society to bring lift, right? And I was proud to say that the organization we represent is actually working towards those goals and have put those goals in place for many years. So happy to do that.
Yeah, you're out there advocating. I mean, hard. Most of the unions, I've been so impressed by your union and the different unions that I've been working with. I mean, so impressive, and the amount of people that you get out and the stories that you hear, because it's by listening to stories, again, because people don't know. They think that's out there somewhere, right? Like you were saying, you were driving by in your car, you noticed it, but people are just driving by in their very tunnel vision. So by putting the rallies, being in your face, talking about it, let's talk about it, that's what starts changing.
Sure. And people don't really necessarily understand how a community outside of their world is affecting their pocketbooks. We try to tell that story about the tax coffers and how it's affecting community programs and local programs when you're not paying into those taxes. And so, those are always topics of conversation that we have and top of mind for us, but getting that out to the larger community is part of the job that we have as well. If you could change one thing about what's happening in the construction industry related to worker safety and exploitation, what would it be and why?
Oh, geez, one thing. One thing. Well, definitely we talked a lot about education. So I wish people just knew what was really happening.
The one thing we could do, because we have the leverage to do it, is as a governing body, right? I think municipalities, counties, states should take the responsibility to make sure that we hire responsible contractors that take care of our employees. The private sector is a little more challenging because there's less oversight, less transparency. But I think the government has a responsibility to make sure that we only use employers that do the right thing by their workforce. And the one thing I think we've talked about in the past, and this ties into, the vulnerability tied to someone's work authorization. And we know many of the cases that we put together, the predominant workforce is either here on some type of visa or they're undocumented, and that's why they're being exploited. So the one thing we found that's been most effective is how quick can we get that person to get work authorization so they can either join a union, work for a union employer, and not be exploited. And we've started a work protection unit, but we started a program where we help them do their paperwork for their deferred action. And when we've done that so far over the last year or so, when we've seen somebody that was traditionally exploited, now they get work authorization, now they are no longer exploited. So if we can figure out a way to give people the access to work from out of the shadows so they can work on the books and are less likely to be exploited and be members of the union, I think that's going to change the culture. But we've also seen resistance from the business community who don't want to see that change. Because if we change somebody's work status or authorization and they know they're less likely to be exploited, well, that means safety is going to have to increase. You're going to have to pay workers' comp. You might have to offer health care, and you're probably going to have to pay a decent wage. And unfortunately, there's folks in the business community that don't want that. A small portion of the business community, but a vocal portion of the business community. And I think we're doing great things, and we need to continue to do that. But I think that's one thing for us that's been extremely successful is work authorization, allowing them to come out of the shadows has changed their lives. I've seen it day in and day out.
That's great. Just listening to you talk, though, you're doing God's work. If you're able to do that and helping them get their work authorization, that is fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a game changer for us. And,
Oh, my goodness.
And continuing to tell their story, too, and getting that message out there that we're helping them one by one to try to create these better opportunities.
Yep. And I believe we do great work, but I know you're doing great work on two fronts, on the private side as an attorney, but also on the governing side with public policy. So this might be a tough question.
Oh, boy.
So how would you personally define success, on your personal life or compared to, what you're doing in your professional life? Or is it really one and the same because it's a passion?
The first word that comes to mind is being impactful. So that's how I would measure success professionally and personally, being impactful to my clients and to helping New Jersey residents live a better life, a safer life, a fairer life, and then being impactful to my son and have my son be proud of me and see that I've broken barriers and that I'm a hard worker and that anything is possible. I came from really humble beginnings. I came here when I was 8 years old. We had to learn English. I was in ESL classes for about 5 years. My parents, blue-collar workers, they were in the union. I was in the union because I lived in Atlantic City. And when you live in I grew up outside of Atlantic City, but when you live in that area, everybody works in the casinos. I worked in the casinos. I was Local 54. My dad worked in the casinos. Then he was a maintenance worker. He worked for the schools, and they were also in the union. And I remember even when I was a young girl and I was working in the casinos, the fact once we became in the union, we felt so much protected. We were like, no, don't mess with us because I'm going to have my union rep.
Yep.
And I would hear that. I was still maybe 19, 20, 21 while I was working in the casinos and just listening to my peers. They can't do that to you. Call the union. They were like our big brother. So being impactful because I didn't, I never knew I was even going to go to college. That wasn't talked about in my family. Yep. Not because we didn't value education, but because they were just trying to make money. They were just trying to feed us. So they weren't always talking about college. I remember the first time ever somebody asked me if I was going to go to college. I was a junior in high school, and I said no, because nobody had ever asked me that in my life. I never met a lawyer ever until I got to college, and my professor was a lawyer, and I really liked my professor. So going back to being impactful to my son and knowing that anything is possible, like anything, especially in this country, like I love this country because there is no class system really, where other countries, even in Puerto Rico, if you are born poor, it's very difficult to go up in the ladder, but not here. Like you can do that here in the United States. It's really the American dream, and it's so beautiful.
What an amazing story. I didn't know that part or that piece that your parents were in a union and protected when you were growing up, and the legacy that you've now created for yourself because they had those protections to be able to raise you in an environment that allowed you to have the safety to go to school and to live your dream, and enough money collected to help you get there, right? So that's wonderful. And now you have your own pathway and passion and are helping the community both on the governance side and with your law firm, and really just helping the community is just this is great. This is great. I really appreciate you being on today.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much.
continue to do the good work, because Anthony and I, we know what this industry can deliver in a positive and a negative way, and certainly you're helping us to raise all boats. So thanks again.
Thank you.
So I heard there's opportunity. The American dream's still alive. Unions are great, and that you've created generational wealth. So thank you for being here, and
Thank you
keep
so
up the
much.
great work. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.